Bruce, you have really made me fall in love with RMF as an analyst. There's actually a lot to get into for risk management framework, because what I like about this over analyst work, first of all, let me define each one. So when I'm talking about cybersecurity analyst versus a cybersecurity compliance person, we're talking about an analyst normally is looking at, I would say, real-time data. They're looking at information as it comes in, and then they're having to analyze it, right? That's why it's important, as we talked about before, you have to have real good sources of information. You got to have good information coming in to evaluate that information. Use your skills and your experience and your sources as a cybersecurity analyst to figure out what is going on and how can we fix it. And analysts come in many different flavors, right? But it's usually an analyst is somebody who is evaluating real-time information. Whereas a compliance person, they're looking at policy and stuff, right? They're not really into the weeds on the real-time analyst. They might do that, but their main hat is determining the security posture of the organization, right? They're looking at the laws and saying, okay, are we meeting this particular security control? Are we meeting the nature of this security control? And if we're not, what can we do about this? Can we mitigate this in a specific amount of time? Can we remediate this in a specific amount of time? If we can't, we got to do a plan of action and milestone. We have to do some sort of a documentation that is a risk response from the organization. So the difference is a cybersecurity analyst is normally looking at real-time information, and they're having to evaluate that information and then make some sort of a determination based off of the data that they got in, right? And they have to have good information, because otherwise it's garbage in and garbage out. And then your cybersecurity compliance officer, your risk management framework person, your information system security officer, they're looking at the security compliance, the security posture of the organization, and are we meeting this security control? There's a lot of crossover between these two, because you can have one doing some of the other job and all that kind of stuff. But he's saying he's really fallen in love with risk management framework. And I said there's a lot to love about it, because the thing about cybersecurity analysts is that you got to be on top of threats like all the time. You got to be on top of information all the time. You got to constantly ingest all this new information on threats, like it's constant. CVEs are your best friend. You know, that's the vulnerabilities that are out there. But with risk management framework and compliance, you might need to know some of that stuff, like you need to know it, but your main bread and butter is the security controls, which don't typically change but every couple years or so, right? Like they do change, laws do change, all that kind of stuff. You got to keep up with technology and stuff. Like you got this new cloud stuff, like you got to know that stuff, but it's not as real time as your analyst work. So that's one of the real good things about being in compliance, is that it's not as fast paced. Not to say you shouldn't learn this stuff, but it's just not as fast paced as your analyst. And there's different interpretations of both those titles. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. That's been my interpretation of this whole thing.